Hi, my name's Dee, your Professor of Woo Woo, and welcome to Sunchild Tarot. Now, I have with me today a very special guest, the astrologer Shu, who I've seen recently on Spencer's channel. You'll remember that I did a show with Spencer not so long ago. Now, Shu, you have a workshop coming up with Keplar College, exploring the Venus cycles in clients' charts. So I thought I would invite you on and have a discussion on it, because the Venus cycle's not simple, is it?
It's not simple, it's complex. It's simply complex, if you know what I mean. It's so beautiful and symmetrical, yet there's so much depth and complexity around it. So I had to break it up into two parts. So 2 weeks ago, we had a webinar that kind of introduced it, and this is like getting to the guts of it now with the workshop coming up with Kepler. So yeah, and there's plenty more to come.
Well, the link will be in the description down below for this upcoming I've lost the word now, course, session. I don't know, it's falling out the back of the head. Workshop, yeah. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. But also you did a webinar about that recently, which people can purchase from you in the meantime.
Yes, I do have the recordings available, and look, it's not a prerequisite to do this workshop. It's not a prerequisite to watch before you do this workshop. However, you'll get a lot more out of the workshop if you watch this webinar first, if you know what I mean.
Well, from what you were telling me beforehand, by the sounds of it, it will certainly help. So the one thing that's always attracted me to the movement of Venus is the very fact that, well, some people say it traces out a five-pointed star. The way I see it tracing out a pentagram in the sky, or on the chart at least. Tell us more.
Yes, well, you know, it shows us, you know, the pentagram has been long connected to, you know, the occult. It's a strong occult symbol. And, you know, I always think of the myth of Inanna as when I think of Venus. And because I think compared to the archetype of Aphrodite, who Venus is often connected to as well, I think Inanna more aptly describes the complexity of Venus, because Venus is not really just about relationships and beauty and love, you know, like, yes, she is all of that, but she's so much more. Yeah, money, that's right, abundance, but she's so much more. And I think that myth of Inanna really shows like the shadow side of Venus as well, for example, like the jealousy, the envy, the cravings and the desires, you know, it's all the insecurities that we have when we don't have love, or when we don't have, you know, the sense of beauty and abundance, for example. And also shows the power that's involved with that archetype. You know, there's so much transformative, like transmutational qualities involved with Venus, you know, really harnessing that sort of feminine instinctual energy to be able to attract and magnetize, rather than to say pursue, like what Mars would, for example. So yeah, I think that myth of Inanna to me really strongly resonates so much more to Venus. And so yeah, like this is like in terms of the pentagram, so this is where I was going, this Mercury stationing retrograde, about to station retrograde, is really affecting me. But, you know, that occult symbol, that pentagram, I think really shows the very hidden yet powerful aspect of Venus. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Now, and I mean, there's also that signification that has been echoed in multiple religions of the whole 40 days. Now, I know the Inanna myth, but I couldn't quote it chapter and verse, but I assume there's a 40 days bit in there as well, is there?
That's right. This retrograde period that we're about to go through is around 40 days. Like sometimes it's 36, sometimes it's, you know, but we can say on average it's 40 days. But and that is the time that Venus will be, well, according to the myth, I don't think it's the underworld phase of Inanna. a lot of people think it's the underworld phase of the Inanna, but I don't believe so. And that's through my, I guess, research and working ceremonially as well with Venus through this story. I'm not sure how well you or your listeners know this Inanna myth, but she goes through and to the underworld, and she dies and she's resurrected, which is also another common, theme, through the biblical sort of storylines. And when she gets resurrected and returns back to her temple, she has to make this really painful choice to send someone to the underworld, because she had the power to ascend from the underworld. The judges there told her that, well, nobody actually leaves the underworld. And just because you have the power to ascend, it doesn't mean you can just leave. You have to send a replacement. So Inanna has to make this really difficult choice to send a replacement into the underworld. And I believe that is the retrograde part of Venus. And so it's that 40 days of revisiting her life, like who has done right by her, who has done wrong by her, going through all, reliving all these narratives that she's had around relationships and all sorts of stuff. And funny enough, she sends her husband. And it's
has to be useful for something.
I know. I mean, these archetypal stories, right? They just get repeated all the time. But then we see this, I guess, negotiation of then, the husband spending part of his time in the underworld, and his sister replaces him for half of the year. So we again get this idea of fertility and the changing of the seasons, as we do in that series, and Demeter and Persephone myth, and so there's a lot. And so Venus is also very much tied into fertility as well. So we can already start to see the complexity of this planet and how that all fits in. But that 40 days definitely of the retrograde period is definitely in that story and in this Venus cycle. She also spends another longer period in the underworld, which is at the other half of her cycle, when she's actually killed and by her sister and resurrected. So that's a longer underworld phase. That's usually between 60 to 90 days. But this one that we're about to come into at the end of the year will be a 40-day revisiting of our relationship and connection archetypal patterns. And so what often happens, say, when we are going through a Venus retrograde, it's the common an old lover returns, or that's a real textbook kind of thing of what happens. Or we just review our relationships, and not just our romantic relationships, but all sorts of especially one-on-one connections, how we connect and attract through our own beauty and through our own essence, for example.
Now, I have something to contribute later on that very point, but is where you're speaking there, are you speaking about Venus retrogrades in general, or are you speaking about the Venus retrograde in Capricorn? Because let's face it, the world and Capricorn have had such a good relationship this past couple of years. Capricorn is obviously everybody's favorite energy at the moment. So what slant does that joy of Capricorn give to everything that will be occurring?
Yeah, sure. So that was what I just described was just a general Venus retrograde. But yeah, I think in Capricorn, what I think we should be doing is looking at what's been happening in Capricorn over the last 584, not quite 584 days, since Venus started her cycle in June 2020. We've had the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter conjunction there. We've had the eclipses there. So I think this Venus retrograde there is going to be taking us back to those moments, to review those moments. The exact degree will essentially point to as well, you know, if we want to really get nerdy and specific,
yes,
you know, that 26.5 degrees of Capricorn, that will also point us to maybe, you know, what was happening at that 26-degree point. And I think some of the eclipses fell very closely to that. So I think it's a bit of a vortex of time, like a bit of a time map that we can use to sort of go back to that moment and maybe make some peace and reconcile, which is a real strong Venus word, reconcile some issues that we maybe still be harboring around those topics.
Well, I think it's really interesting when you put Pluto in the mix, because I know it's all part of a cycle and what have you. And so it's going, these are the dance steps they're going to take. But it's almost like Venus is shooting on ahead and Pluto's going, oh no, come back here. I'm going to move that way.
Yes, that's right. And, you know, that just confirms the whole energy of this deep dive into something, like a painful revisiting, but a very necessary revisiting of something. I think that Venus retrograde moment, that time, will be perfect if anyone wanted to do a shamanic journey of some sort. You know, I think that would be such a great use of that energy to consciously go in to do shadow work and to meet and confront those things that may be a bit icky within our personal lives, things that we want to shove under the carpet, or things that we want to rather forget about, that we feel shameful of, for example. So some journey, it's a really great journeying time, and I've definitely penciled some dates to do that because you know, I always elect times for that sort of stuff.
I agree with you 100%, and I'm not going to, because there was something else I was going to ask you, but on the back of what you've just said, I've got to talk about the degrees now, because it so backs up what you're saying. So 26 degrees Capricorn. When you look at the rulerships of the Kabbalistic angels, the Shem HaMephorash, this is in the arc of Mitzrael, which is the 5-degree arc, which talks about, is an angel of freedom and internal reparation. So there's that sense of, by, I don't know, shedding constraints around you and finding your freedom. You are rebuilding bits within yourself. Now, that's the whole arc itself, which is 25 to 29 degrees Capricorn. But by degree, the angel is actually ruled by Haziel or Hatziel, which is talking about angelic influences, which I think is sort of goes with the territory. It seems a bit redundant putting that under this angel, but divine mercy and forgiveness. So there's this find freedom, find ways to repair yourself and forgive yourself by going backwards, the retrograde, looking at the past. And then when it starts forward again, that's 11 degrees Capricorn, isn't it? So this time it's the arc of Nehemiah, which is talking about listening to your soul, having discernment. So when Venus is starting going forward again, it's literally, right, what have you learned? Can you actually use what you have learned here? And then because you will pay for it. The degree itself is ruled by Manakel, who is represents accountability and the knowledge of good and evil. So it's, you know what you need to do, you know what you've done, you know what you must not repeat again. Have you worked to forgive yourself? Are you going to go forward and do something different this time? Are you going to have paid attention to the lessons that you've been told?
Wow, that's so fitting of a Capricorn Saturnian,
Isn't it?
domicile ruler saying, hang on a second, the judge of that situation, essentially. Yeah.
So
Wow, that's fascinating.
I absolutely, I found it, the whole study of these angels came from a blog I discovered online. I think his name is John Sandbach or John Sandbach. And then he was talking about the symbols and the angels, and I just took the ball and ran with it. But it's really interesting to take Spencer's way of looking at the diamonds, because again, echoing again this sense of reparation, internal reparation, Venus is going retrograde in the decan of Asclepius, the god of healing.
Right. Yeah. And I noticed as well, like she's in the terms of Mercury as well. And I think that is, Mercury is the psychopath, it's the messenger that delivers souls to the underworld, and back up again as well. So, wow, it's amazing how all these systems just talk the same, not necessarily the same language, but, they all point to the same nature, which is what's so fascinating. Yeah.
Yes, you've got that same vibe coming through. So is Venus bringing some joy to all that Capricorn business that's been going on? Or is it being suppressed somewhat, basically, until it does? Well, I think the answer, we've answered this already, isn't it? Because the answer is yes, until you've done your homework, you can't have any cake.
Well, Venus actually does all right in Capricorn. If we take the theory of Set, as in the nocturnal diurnal theory of planets being day planets or night planets, Venus is a nocturnal planet, and Capricorn is a nocturnal sign, and Venus has triplicity rulership there, so she's quite happy in Capricorn. So I think she's quite comfortable there, and I think Venus can benefit from a little bit of restraint. Like when we see Venus come together with Jupiter, which we have a couple of times recently this year, there's this real problem with wanting too much or overdoing the luxurious or the pampering or the needing and buying it, like this overconsumption. So in Capricorn, having Saturn as its ruler, it's a really good thing for Venus to stay grounded, to only live within her means. And because she's so full of abundance anyway, that she can look within for her abundance, not to look externally. And she is a nocturnal planet. She's meant to look within. But when she's being forced to look outwards, that's when a lot of insecurities can come, a lot of jealousy, insecurities. I want this, why can't I have that? Why doesn't he love me? All this sort of stuff, that can happen. And you see that a lot in people that have strong Venus people, where the Venus might be a little bit debilitated. You see these insecurities come out very strongly. So yeah, I think that there could be worse signs for Venus to be in this retrograde. And of course, this is one of the signs that Venus has her, what you mentioned before, the star point, the Venus star point concept, which Ariel Goodman has pioneered and done a lot of research around. And so when she's going through her retrograde period, halfway through that retrograde period, she'll actually start a whole new 584-day cycle. And that's halfway through that retrograde period. So that new cycle will be starting in Capricorn, which is it's one of those star points that has shifted in our kind of lifetime. Do you know those star points? I'm not sure if you're aware. They
explain them, because I did some Googling before. Explain them, because I did some, as you know, as we was talking before the show, I did some Googling because I was thinking that the star point is the point where it's gone backwards in the retrograde and it crosses over again. So it's like that petal bit of the spirograph of Venus's movement. But then when I went and Googled, it was they were saying it was happening in March. And I was like, but surely it's supposed to be in the middle of the retrograde. But you were saying there's actually, from the name star point, you think there will be 5 points. But you were saying earlier there's 10.
There's 10, yes. So yeah, it gets confusing. There's 5 main ones. So that point will only happen in 5 signs, right? And those 5 signs process over time backwards. And I can't quite remember the amount of years it takes to go through a sign, like 100-something years.
Yeah.
But for example, I was born with the Venus star point in Aquarius, but now it's in Capricorn. So I have to look to Capricorn as my point, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it's significant when those points also shift signs. We had the Scorpio to Libra one just in 2020. So that's significant when it shifts, because it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. So
wouldn't it be 5 in a
Venus,
lifetime?
Pardon?
Wouldn't it be 5 in a lifetime? Because if one shift.
Oh no, when the point goes through precession and it moves backwards, because that rosette or that star doesn't just happen in the same point every year. It's every time it repeats that point, it repeats it almost at the same day in the same month, but around 2 degrees backwards. So it keeps moving 2 degrees, 2 degrees, 2 degrees until it finally makes it to the previous sign. And that's where you get that fractal effect of that rosette. You know, like it doesn't just stay one rosette or one star. It keeps moving like a fractal, basically. So the year that you were born, I mean, the Venus year that you were born is a significant one to follow. And this is what I'm teaching in this workshop, because every time we experience this Venus year, that Venus year is about 18 months, stuff happens, to us, like important things. And you'll see, and in this workshop, we'll be tracking these, and it's very symmetrical. Every 8 years, you'll see a repeat of the natures of your personal Venus repeating through your events. From birth, often it is seen in our parents' lives and the decisions that they make that then have an impact or leaves a patterning in our lives for our relationships. And then as we get older, we start to take control of this Venus pattern that emerges. And every time it happens, it's like we experience an upgrade of sorts. So that year that you were born is associated with one point. But halfway through that year, Venus will make another superior conjunction. That's the loop that it makes in the rosette. And that will be that's also called a Venus star point. And that will happen every 4 years. It's hard for me to explain it without a diagram. That will happen every 4 years after your Venus star point, in the same sign. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, let me see if I've understood this correctly, because I think when I was saying 5 times and you were saying 1 times, I think we were saying the same thing. So the shape of Venus's rosette within the chart. So this is obviously a pentagram, as you can tell. Sorry, I'll give you the shiny side. So the whole pentagram, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I?
It goes backwards.
It's going backwards.
Yeah.
So all 5 points are moving, but it's once in a lifetime, because only one of those 5 points is relevant to your chart or my chart.
Yes.
That's what you were saying, isn't it? Right.
That's right. But you might live through your whole life with that Venus star point in the same sign.
Right.
You know, like it just depends when you were born, I guess. But I know there was a shift in the 60s. There was a shift in the late 70s. There was one in the 80s, and then we just had one last year.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. I mean, it gets quite technical, but basically, what the key takeaway is that the Venus year that you were born is a very important year to follow, because that will actually, if you can understand those patterns, you can then project forwards and expect to see those patterns emerge. But with that knowledge, you can work around that, and you know, it's your own form of magic, isn't it? You have this foresight, you know what's coming up ahead, and you can plan for it and make the best of that situation. So it's generally, so every 8 years, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, and then my head can't do the maths, 48.
Yeah. That was what I was wanting to discuss. I've got 2 questions, so you can choose which one you want to go for. Because one is, which has suddenly disappeared out the back of my head, so I'll go for the second question. You were saying, oh yes, the cycle. So we've got these 5 or 10 points of the Venus cycle as it moves around, but that is complicated yet again by whether it's a morning star, whether it's an evening star.
Okay, right. So,
just to add another layer of simplicity.
That's right. So we told you this is going to be complex. Right. Okay. So when we're born, we can be born at any time of that 584 days of that Venus cycle. And in that 584 days, Venus goes through a whole heap of transmutations, like going from morning star to evening star, going from fast to slow, from direct to retrograde, from approaching the sun to separating from the sun. There's another condition, from being visible to being invisible, right? So all of these little conditions add to the type of Venus delineations that you would have. So that was my last webinar. That was what that was all about. So if you were born, you know, with Venus in Libra in the 2nd house, right? You know, we would get a lot of information from that for sure. However, like by knowing the Venus phase, you would add even more information to that by saying if it was morning star, that would be more of a dynamic drive towards abundance and money, like a more masculine pursuing form of finding money and abundance. Whereas if that Venus in the 2nd house in Libra was in an evening star phase, you know, that money is more likely to come to you because you've got this feminine magnetism, instinctual way of attracting the money, for example. So yeah, we can find these little nuances to do with the Venus phase. And then, so once you really have determined the full condition of Venus, like all its phase conditions, you can then see all these conditions play out every 8 years. So it's not just that, definitely the houses and the sign qualities come out every 8 years, but then all of a sudden, all these like phase conditions, like for example, I'll give you an example. I had this client who was born at that phase of that superior conjunction. So one of the Venus star points, you know, the opposite Venus star point.
Just explain what superior conjunction is as well for me viewers.
So this is the halfway point of a Venus cycle when she's in the underworld. And in the myth of Inanna, this is tied up to that part where Inanna has been killed by her sister and she's hung on a meat hook. And, you know, this is when she's about to be resurrected. And so every 8 years, this client had situations in her life where she felt like she was hung up on a meat hook, like literally, like she didn't use those words. Like it was you know, literally powerless, like, you know, really terrible relationships, abusive, but it happened to be these every 8 years when Venus made her final, you know, 8-year sort of cycle.
Yeah.
And she happened, this lady also happened to know the myth of Inanna. And when I said, oh, well, did you feel like you were Inanna hanging up on the meat hook? And she said, yes, that's exactly what it's like, you know, all these times, like I was powerless, stripped bare and naked, you know. So you can see every 8 years, these phase conditions will replicate every single 8-year period in slightly different ways. And it gradually just, every time it just upgrades a little bit, and you finally kind of work it out, you know, if you've done the work, I guess.
I was going to say, there is a way to actually finally not get on the meat hook next time.
Yes. Yeah, there is, you know, I think, you know, as naturally, like all things being equal, even the most average person that had no idea about anything metaphysical or culture or anything like that, you know, you would always just gradually develop as a human being and make wiser choices. And so you know, well, one would hope anyway.
Yeah.
And so you do generally see more like the evolution of that story. It definitely starts off more raw and uncontrolled and not inner directed, but, you know, eventually people do start to, you know, to gain that power back and start making some wiser decisions in relationships or whatnot. But, you know, like it is a, the idea that this 8-year, like the reason why it's 8 years for Venus is that there's 2 types of cycles. There's the synodic cycle, which is when Venus and the sun make a cycle from the perspective of our Earth. So that's 584 days. And then there's the tropical cycle of Venus just like going around the zodiac and coming back to its position. And that's around about a year, you know, because it's around the same speed as the sun. But every 8 years, the tropical and the synodic cycle happens to merge at the same point. And so that's why we look at the 8 years. And that's what we call, the ancients called it the lesser years or the mean years. And
yes, I've seen the term.
If you've seen that, yeah. So every planet has a lesser year or mean year. So Mercury is 20 years. The moon is, the sun is 19 or something. I can't remember. But anyway, those year periods are the time periods that they use in zodiacal releasing and in Fidaria.
Right. Okay.
So that's the connection. And it's said that when these years emerge, that the planets become mature and they show their significations. And so that's the whole theory behind these 8-year Venus cycle repetitions.
Now, the maths, anyone who watches this channel know I love the maths of astrology, but even that, talking about the different phase conditions, I'm not even going to try to repeat that list that you said, along with the retrogrades and everything. That makes my head hurt.
It makes my head hurt too.
I definitely want to Spirograph to maybe do a special, you know, just a special little plastic disc just for this one motion.
Yes.
Actually, we should see if Spirograph would do an astrology-based set. That would work really well.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Now, you've also mentioned, you mentioned to me beforehand about using the Venus cycle within your magical practice. Mm-hmm. So this for me is the meat and potatoes. As much as I love the astrology, tell me about the hocus pocus side. Because you were talking about Inanna and you were implying that you were almost using the myth of Inanna as a path working to go through things.
Yeah, in a way, because I've got this really fantastic book and it's the it's the translation of the original cuneiform tablets of the Inanna story. And
Right.
in this book, there are the 7 hymns to Inanna. And
Right.
it's not an astrological book. It's more of a historical, mythological book. However, reading these hymns and knowing the astrology, I just know that they would have said this hymn during the morning star first heliacal rise, or, you know, they would have said this at the monthly Venus moon conjunction. So I've just gone with it, and I've been using these hymns as I follow these cycles. Right.
So that's similar to the way that people often use the Orphic hymns.
Yeah, pretty much. So instead of reading the Orphic hymn to Venus, sometimes, like I might read one of these hymns, for example, and I find it has. Hey?
I love that on one level, because it's never mind this Johnny come lately Aphrodite business. Let's get down to the proper, the OG.
That's right, you know, and I'm a Venus retrograde by birth, you know, I'm deep, you know, I want to get down to the dirty and the, you know, the pain. Yeah, I might hang myself on my midtalk and resurrect myself.
You're really selling this whole Venus retrograde business, you know? You're making it sound such sunshine and light.
Oh, maybe I might send my husband to the underworld. I don't know.
He gets to come back out again.
Valid ceremonial practice method. Oh, but yeah, coming back to your question, so we've got the phases of Venus, we've got the projection of Venus every 8 years, but within the 584 days, there are also significant moments. There's a handful of about 12 moments of that cycle that I class really significant. So that's the beginning of the cycle, the inferior conjunction. Then there's the morning heliacal rise, like the first time you see Venus rise on the east. Mm-hmm. Then there's the morning elongation, the morning greatest brilliance, then the heliacal morning set, then the superior conjunction, and then it repeats all on the other side, but the evening version.
Yeah.
So I will often do a ceremony or a ritual on these moments. For example, we had the evening heliacal rise in May, and that happened to be Venus in Taurus. So it was really lovely. So I had already gathered up some rose petals on the Venus hour that I had planned for. And I had just said, oh, the first time I see Venus in the evening, I'm going to make a hydrosol, this rose hydrosol. And so you don't really know when you're going to see it, because it depends on the clouds and what the weather's going to be like. So, and I'm lucky because I live out on a large property and I live in the middle of nowhere. So I've got clear access to the sky. So I just kind of, you know, tell Venus, you know, as soon as I see you rise in the evening, you know, I'll say my prayer and I'll rush home and do my hydrosol. And so then I've used that hydrosol for all my ceremonies throughout the cycle, including I've just started planted out a new orchard this year, which I had done with Venus in mind. And so the hydrosol was used to bless all of the rose, you know, and I did these copper talismans for each of the beginning of the rose, and I did my hymns, everything, you know. So I was really consecrating the orchard as my huge sort of Venus talisman in a way.
And giving it the full Monty by the sounds of it.
Pardon?
Giving it the full Monty by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and I'm in a Venus perfection year too. So it really, it just resonated. It was just so magical sitting out there. So yeah, you can follow those significant points. However, you also see that when Venus is in her morning phase, so for 9 months, and notice the 9 months is half the cycle of Venus, and Venus rules fertility, and, you know, 9 months is the human gestation period. So it's all kind of links up there. But she'll make 7 visible conjunctions with the waning crescent moon in the morning. And then in the evening, she'll make 7 conjunctions with the waxing crescent moon in the evening. So every month you'll see this. And you'll see this as the, like the crescent moon with the star, that you do see in many flags and symbols around the world. So that's what this points to. And the waning moon in the morning star phase is symbolic of Inanna being stripped of all of her powers as she descends. Whereas the waxing moon in the evening phase is the symbolic of Inanna gaining back of her powers, like putting on all of her vestments as she ascends back up to her throne. So every month you'll see her either in the east, morning star in the morning, in the east, evening star in the west in the evening. So when you see Venus and the moon together, that's the symbol, that's the time to be able to go out there and say a little prayer for Venus. So that's another way you can work with it. Right.
So, I mean, I'm just thinking now, because my head's going off on all of the maths and trying to remember everything that you've said, because I am going to end up watching this back so many times. Where can people find your pre-workshop webinar? And I know that you've sent me the link for the actual workshop, which is in the description down below. So that's through Keplar College, yeah?
Yeah, that's right, through Keplar College. So they can just email me, or just email me. I guess I haven't got it up anywhere yet, just because I'm hopeless with all that sort of stuff. But I'm too busy saying my prayers and hymns to Venus. But I've also got
out in the garden.
Yeah, that's right. I'm too busy planting trees. But I've also got a Venus cycle calendar, which I can send you. I mean, we're at the end of it, so it's you're going to get a couple of months. I'm giving away for free now. No, I've given it away. Throughout the whole time, like it was a free calendar, but it basically just shows you all the Venus moon conjunctions, because that's the easiest to see. It's clockwork, to me. You can, even coming here tonight I just was looking at Venus, she is the ancient clock, so you don't really even need the calendar, because you just see the crescent moon with Venus and go, it's time,
I can't believe, I mean, that whole image of the crescent moon with the star at top, that's something that I'd never really paid a great deal of attention to at the time. So seeing how Venus has had that statement, or the legends of Venus has had that statement on so many countries. How many countries have that symbol in their flag?
Yeah, I know.
Their language.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? But the symbology of it is just really amazing. And what fascinates me even more is that same star that's so obvious in the night sky, like at the moment, is the same star that the Babylonians were looking at 5,000 years ago. It's the exact same. Like, that just trips me out thinking about that. And when I did the morning heliacal rise, you have to get up early in the morning, obviously, and standing there cold in my dressing gown, just imagining what they would have done, because that was the moment they would plan for wars. That's the energy of that morning heliacal rise of Venus.
Well, this is one thing I was thinking about, because as I say, Inanna I'm only vaguely familiar with, but I've always in my head thought there was a link between Inanna and then Astarte to Aphrodite. Am I correct about that? Because Astarte was love and war.
Was what, really? What
was a goddess of love and war.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, Venus, Inanna was also, that was one of her many faces. She was as the morning star, she was the warrior. She was the one that, that time of that heliacal rise was when they, you know, the Mayans, Sumerians, they would all be out there, you know, planning. That's when they would plan for their wars. I'm not exactly sure about that connection with the starter, but possibly, I would imagine so. Yeah, definitely. And wouldn't you say, you know, like the Aphrodite kind of archetype? It's just like, you know, it's like, you know, I've always thought that Librans are just like a nice Aries. Like they still get what they want, but they quietly engineer it. Like it's like the sharp knife in a velvet scabbard, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure, you know, Librans like that. They you know, I always had this joke, they send you to hell, but with a smile on your, like you're smiling the whole time and happy, and you know, they're
completely innocent the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're just engineering this whole situation to get what they want, you know. Thinking it's what you want, you know.
Not that we would be broad brushing any signs at all.
Yeah, no, yeah. Hopefully, I hope you're not a Librans.
No, you're fine. Cancer rising, Pisces sun. So, also, let's spend a couple of minutes, if I may, tap your brain for. So, if someone has Venus retrograde in their chart, good, bad, meet hooks.
That's me. Well, so the thing with the retrograde is you know, this is textbook, like, but I've also seen it a lot in my clients, that these are the natives that come into the, trauma at a very early age, often through no fault of their own.
Right.
Traumas, you know, can look very different, but sometimes it's can be, you know, really intense, like abuse and things like that. But other times it may be just like this sense of loss or abandonment or rejection. And they really hold that in their relationship patterns for a really long time, or all their life, really. But if they learn to transcend it, they become very great, I guess, healers. And it's very shamanic, you know, they're into like taking people down to be able to bring them back up again. Like that's how they roll. And so yeah, it's not the most common sign, you know. It's not common. They say, you know, I don't know where this figure comes from, but 7% of people have Venus retrograde, so it's not common.
40%, 40 days ish every couple of years. So that's not a lot of people. That's not a large birth period, is it?
No, it's not. So the people that are being born in December, like they're huge shamans in the making, like, you know, conjunct Pluto. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, for me personally, that definitely was the case for me, you know. But, you know, my father passed away when I was 4, and, you know, that had a whole range of implications in my life, of which one I feel more connected to him spiritually than I do physically, because I was, I guess, too young. But that's something that I've always had, that's driven me, you know, to a point where when I was a child, I never really saw any difference with having a father that was here in the physical world and not in the physical world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So whilst it brought a lot of pain and issues down the track, it also was a gift in a way. And I think Venus retrogrades learn to understand these pains as gifts. Yeah.
That's a lovely place to wrap up, isn't it? So where
on that sad note.
So we've given that little glimmer of hope before Capricorn smashes it. So where can people find you, Shu?
I've got a website, Intercycle Astrology. Oh no, it's intercycle.com. You'll probably have that in your notes, I would imagine, because it's a funny kind of spelling, you know. So, and I'm also on Instagram, intercycle_astrology. So,
right.
Yeah.
So all the links, well, the link for the upcoming workshop, it will be in the description down below, like I must have said about the 5th time now. Email Shu and contact her through her site to be able to purchase a copy of that pre-workshop webinar that, as you say, it's not essential, but it sounds so useful because it does sound complicated. And I love complication, and even I'm like, oh no, I'm not sure I want to go near this one. Apart from the whole fascination aspect. Thank you so much for coming on, Shu. If and when you're doing new workshops, you are always welcome to come onto the channel, and we can discuss some of the groundwork, you know, and hopefully give people a taster of what it is that you're going to offer. Because as you can tell with this one, it sounds like there's going to be plenty to learn and plenty on offer with this workshop. You know, it's if you like complexity,
yes.
this will be an ideal one for you.
Yeah, that's right. Hope I haven't lost anyone yet. You know, people have probably all gone to bed now that this is too complex, but possibly there could be something happening around the Venus retrograde kind of time. I might be doing a workshop or webinar or something. If you know, in a non-COVID world, I probably would have got a group together to do a journey, but yeah, that's not going to happen.
Well, that's before we completely sign off, because I know I just started the outro, but on a mundane level, what do you think we will see out in the world on the Venus, or do you think it's more of a personally experienced energy?
No, I think we'll see it. We will notice kind of, you know, relationships in general going haywire a little bit, right. Not just with your one, like say with a partner or something, but just with everyone. You're starting to see the shadow sides come out, you know, the bitchiness or the jealousies, backstabbing, that kind of stuff coming up, I think.
Which rather makes the idea of the final peak of the Saturn-Uranus square a lot of fun, because that's smack bang in the middle of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's about really getting real with relationships, and that might not be the funnest thing to do in a relationship, but the results, if you want to go there, can be really great.
So as we were saying, the earlier finishing comment, the pain was worth it.
Yeah,
is the one.
That's right. Yeah. Good if you're into that kind of relationship.
And don't forget, of course, as I was saying with the angels and with Asclepius, it's a healing process. Honest.
That's so get some good medicine.
Thank you so much, Shu. All of Shu's details will be below, and we'll see you back on the channel soon. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See ya.